Hey guys, welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining tonight where we are going to be talking about season expectations, record expectations, player expectations, award expectations. But first, our guys over at Handsome Jack and our intro video.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how we doing?
I'm good. You woke me up a little bit with your good evening tonight. I think my volume,
right.
My kid might have messed with my volume coming into my mic, but woke me up a little bit. I'm good though. How are you, man?
Good. It's a beautiful summer day. We are through the dog days of summer. This is like the weird part where there's no actual stuff happening, and I'm not a baseball guy.
We don't want football news.
Yeah, any news now for football is bad.
Except for extensions. I wouldn't mind a couple extensions.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the Chiefs had some news with Orlando Brown and how he wants like $25 million a year at tackle. Good luck with that. Wish him all the best. Mm-hmm. It's a weird time of year where we hope nothing comes up. They can announce an extension. Poyer, Edmonds, Ed Oliver, whoever. Just extend some people. That'd be cool. Yep. But yeah, there's no real news happening, but it's we're almost there. We're getting through there, and coming up here, we're actually going to have some actual things happening. So training camp coming up and everything like that. But tonight we're going to talk about actual expectations in the season and how that goes. And I figured no better place to start than with an ode to our man Bruce Nolan and his, he likes to define things and talk about. I think his phrase is expectations minus reality equals disappointment. And I'm curious, how do you approach things when people talk about what their expectations are? Because I think some people put their goals or their hopes or like the ceiling of what they want and they call it expectations, but that's not what you actually expect. So how do you handle things like that where people start throwing around expectations?
Well, careful, because I do think some people actually expect those absolute, in my Twitter
best case
scenarios were full of, last year when I was upset about the loss in the playoffs, but I didn't say the season was a failure. And I had a lot of people that were mad at me and saying like, well, you can't, there's no moral victories and it was Super Bowl or bust. And so there are a number of people that their expectation is nothing other than Super Bowl and everything else isn't okay. So for me, I don't do that. I'm with you. I think I try to have my expectations grounded in some reality, although my wife calls me a homer no matter what it is that I say about the Bills. She says that's a homer take. So, but I do try to dial it back a little bit and have somewhat. But I will say, the last year and this year, it is hard to say it with a straight face that I'm trying to have serious, not homer expectations, and then say, well, they're going to win X amount of games and go to the Super Bowl. And with the Super Bowl, so we're hitting a hard part where expectations are kind of bordering that over the top best case scenarios. And so it is weird for people. So I love to get your definition of it, because we'll get into some of the details of, breaking down our expectations at the different levels here that we're going to talk about tonight. But I'm interested to hear your definition of this.
So I do try to separate it into like my baseline expectations. Like, hey, I expect this to happen. And I use what you talked about. Like, hey, what would I consider a failure? What would I consider a disappointment? What would I consider like, hey, this was a bad season versus, okay, yes, like I won't be excited if anything besides winning a Super Bowl happens, but that doesn't mean it was a failure. Like I can have other things like, hey, we still had a great year. Like, yeah, I wish I had ended differently, but this was still good. That was still good. And, some of those, we have some other topics we'll get into in different areas, but, I have an expectation that they win the division. Like if they don't win the division, something went wrong. So there's something that was out there. I expect them to win playoff games, to win a playoff game, to have wins and not be a one and done in the playoffs would be a disappointment for me. And then I'm torn on if I expect them to make the conference championship game. Like, that's right about where I'm at of like, do I actually expect either a bye and a playoff win or 2 playoff wins and then conference championship game and above is where it's just excitement and bonus and gravy? But that's right now, that's right around where I am, is that I expect either a bye and a playoff win or 2 playoff wins, and then I'll just be super excited if it's more than that.
The problem with expectations in the NFL is the one and done format of the playoffs can be kind of crazy. So I guess what I would look to is, all right, they're starting the year, they're Super Bowl favorites across the board, pretty much universally. Yeah, that is a sick hoodie. I was looking for my Cover One zip up hoodie.
There we go.
Yeah, and I couldn't find it today. I got to figure that out. But for the expectations, they're Super Bowl favorites across the board, universally, wherever you're looking. I think if they can maintain that into the playoffs, like when they head into the playoffs, whether they have the bye or not, I think it's fair to expect them to at least be in the competition for that bye at the end of the year. I don't know if they'll get it or not. But when they head into the playoffs, I guess where my expectation is when we get to that part of the season that they're still the favorite, that they're still one of the top 2 to 3 teams that everyone's saying when you're going into it that you need to watch out for this team. And then once you're in there, any number of scenarios can happen, a bad matchup, just a bad week or whatever it is. And so I think it's hard to say, man, if they go and don't win any playoff games, regardless of what the matchup is, or, they miss the conference championship again, that's ultimately a failure. And yes, they don't go on to win a Super Bowl like everybody wants them to be. But I think as long as they are heading into the playoffs and in that playoff position, and they're still the favorite and still the team that everybody's looking out and saying, man, Buffalo's the team to watch. To me, I think that fulfills the expectations I have, that they started the year as the team to be in the NFL, and that when they got to the tournament, which is a one and done tournament, that universally they were still seen as one of the best teams in the league. And then from there, the NFL is such a crapshoot and so much can go wrong or right in the playoffs, depending on what you're doing, that it's hard for me to then hold them to say, well, they didn't win every single game in the playoffs and therefore they failed to meet my expectations. I'm not going to go that far, but I know other people will.
Yeah. So one of the first steps to get there is one of the first topics we'll go in here, and that's the record expectations. And, going through there, we talked about, I do think they should be shooting for that number 1 seed. And I know that was, the direct question here, Jason asking, would not getting the number 1 seed be a failure? And it's hard to know that, like that,
There's one that's tough.
3 teams tied for the best record last year, but based on the tiebreakers, it didn't go right. It's, so falling to the 3 seed last year was just tiebreakers and things like that. So there's different things that could come up that route, but going in with that kind of lead and that kind of approach and the Super Bowl favorite roster and the best roster in the NFL, it's crazy, all the offseason things. I think, Mina Kimes had them as the best offense and best defense on the Athletic Football Show. They had Brandon Beane as the best GM, and I think they had McDermott as like 3rd or 4th as the best coach in the league, and just everywhere flowering us with praise and everything. It's really hard to keep straight. I know before we go to you, there was one other analyst I wanted to go to on what he thought the record would be this year.
Buffalo Bills going undefeated, and we're going to the Super Bowl. Yeah, that's.
It's weird you got that video clip of me. Looks like it was from a long time ago. Yeah, I think the 1 seed's tough for all the reasons you said. Like, so much can get baked into that and missing out on that. I think, again, for me, as long as they're competing for that in those last couple of weeks of the season, that they're in position to get that 1 seed, I don't necessarily need them to get it. I need them to just be up at the top. I don't want them, if something's gone wrong and they're limping in, fighting for a wild card spot, or they're, they just barely squeak by winning the division at the end of the year. I think that's probably not meeting expectations, but I think as long as they're competing for that top seed, with there only being 1 now, that's hard. I do think it's not going to be as easy for KC this year with how tough that AFC West is.
division.
So I do think it's more open than it has been in years past, but we don't know how some of these other divisions are going to shake out. One of these teams can go on a heck of a run, beat up on their division, and just take a lead. And who knows, the Bills stumbled at times last year. This is not, while the roster is really good and we're excited for it, there's going to be, it's a marathon of a season. There's going to be stumbling that happens along the way. So as long as they're competitive in that area, I'm going to be happy. I do think as far as like a win expectation, I don't like to go through the schedule one by one and say they're going to win this game, they're going to win that game. There's too much context of variables that we're not associated with. I don't know the other teams well enough. I follow the NFL, but I don't know the other teams like I know the Bills. So there's a lot of bias baked into me going through that. And I will sound like the guy that we just played the clip of. I'll just say, the Bills are going undefeated. They can beat every single one of these teams. When I look at the schedule this year, they can beat every single one of those teams. Like, it wouldn't be crazy for me to pick it undefeated in terms of, can they Bills straight up with the perfect conditions beat this team 8 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times, whatever it is. I think most times they will. They're not going to do that. They're going to have issues. They're going to stumble. They're going to lose some games they probably shouldn't. I think 12 to 13 wins is a reasonable level of expectation for this team for me. And I think that gets them in that conversation of being that number 1 seed.
That's where my head is at, in that it's going to be a combination of, they're absolutely a double-digit win team. I expect 11 wins. I expect 11-6 at worst. I think they're capable. I again, it sounds like a homer. I don't think 15-2 is crazy. I don't think that's out of the question. I think that's absolutely in play. And then I kind of think they're going to fall in between those two. I think that 11's the bottom. I think 15's kind of the top. And I think they're going to fall in that 12, 13, 14 range. And it's probably going to be with some exciting wins over. They're going to win some of those, Packers, Buccaneers, or Chiefs. Some of those games, they'll get a revenge game on the Titans. They'll win some of those games, but they'll probably also stumble in a game they shouldn't. They're going to give up a game that they probably should win, or get to the end of the season and not need it anymore. So I do think 13-4 is about what I'm feeling. Is going to be in that range. And then you're talking 13-4 should get you the number 1 seed. If you fall back to 12-5, now you're talking about tiebreakers. Now you're talking about, does that last week of the season matter? Are you resting? Are you going another direction? But that's the ballpark I think we should be looking at. And that if they, again, health, everything else staying right, I think that's what we should be expecting. You should expect a baseline of double-digit wins and being in that game. But, Taylor bringing it up here, a lot of other folks in the chat, there's games where they stumbled. They weren't ready for that Steelers game in the opener last year. And obviously I hope that they learn from that to be able to go in focused and ready. But this year it's the Rams. So losing to the Rams in LA, the defending Super Bowl champs, if they lose the opener, that's not some huge disappointment. They're, the Rams are favored by a point. They're awesome. They just won the Super Bowl. It's in LA. Like, that's not some huge issue. I hope they win. But there's several of those. The first 7 games are really freaking tough. Being able to be in that spot to be able to open up, and you go Rams, then you go to the Titans, then at the Dolphins, playing in Miami early is always tough, then at the Ravens, who are coming back super healthy, the Steelers, who are probably not as strong as they were last year, but still a well-coached team, and then at Chiefs, and then Sunday Night Football for the Packers. 7, those are 6 really good teams out of 7, so that's going to set the tone for the season. If they're 4-3 after those 7 games, now all of a sudden I'm assuming, okay, it's probably 11-6 or 12-5, but if they get through those 6 games at 5-2, 6-1, now I think the 14 or 15 wins are in play, because the schedule is so front-loaded. By the time you then turn the corner, it's Jets, Vikings, Browns, Lions, Patriots, Jets, Dolphins, Bears, like a lot of winnable games through that next stretch. So I think we're going to know early if they're going to be able to hit the ceiling of those expectations for the record.
Yeah, and it could this could be a year where everybody's worried about these AFC teams and that they can beat up on each other so much where you're hitting that 12-win mark, and that's going to put you in the driver's seat in the AFC. So I think, again, if they can get through that early gauntlet, what they can't do is what happened last year, where it took them at least offensively, till that Tampa Bay game to really turn it on offensively. They can't do that. I know a lot of people are going into the season and saying the Bills, Mina Kimes saying they're the best offense. When we really look back at that 2021 Bills team, the defense really carried that team through the first 8-9 weeks of the season. And still to this day, because of the way the season ended, with Josh Allen playing out of his mind for 3 games straight and the defense struggling against Kansas City in the playoffs and struggling a couple times throughout the end of the season there, I think the view of what this team was in 2021 is a little bit skewed. I think people think the offense was better as a whole than it actually was, and that the defense, needed a lot of fixing, where I, looking back at the big picture, really felt the opposite. Like, this was a number 1 rated DVOA defense by almost every metric. They were one of the top defenses in the NFL, and the offense was like 12th in passing DVOA, which you wouldn't expect with Josh Allen and the way he ended the season. But because that first half of the season was so tough sledging getting through, that Jags game that got mentioned in the chat was mixed in there. There was a couple of just bad offensive performances that they can't afford to allow that type of slow, stagnant start with the schedule that they have in the first half of this season. They can't have that type of start this year and then get to the same type of expectations that they want. Because I do think, while I say in the AFC could be beating up on each other and maybe 12 wins gets it done, they really want to secure and not even have to deal with that fight at the end of the year. And in order to do that, like you said, they've got to be winning 5 of those first 7. Really, you can't lose more than 3 of those games before, or you put yourself behind the 8 ball quite a bit, and now you're playing catch up.
And those teams are the good ones that you'd lose the tiebreakers to. So if you drop more than 2 or 3 of those, all of a sudden those losses almost count double, because now they're going to be a loss to the Titans or the Ravens or the Chiefs or teams you're competing with for those. Totally. Those different options.
Yeah.
So, as we go through there, I think that kind of sets the tone for what we're looking for here. We talked about the playoff finish. We talked about the record. Let's talk about some of the players here. So we'll start on the younger side of things. Who are some of the guys that you think we're going to get to the end of the season here, and they're going to be the young breakouts for what we're expecting here? And I know we have some awards coming up later that we'll talk through, so you can save some if you need. But who are some of the guys you see as kind of a young breakout that could surprise people?
Well, I don't know. My first one, I don't know if it's fair. Dawson Knox, because he broke out last year, right? Like, the production that he had last year broke out, but I think he's still not. While Bills fans probably, and myself included in this, want to pound the table of him as the top 10 tight end in the league, I think even some people would get crazy enough to say top 5. I don't know that he's there yet. I think he needs another year with increased production from what he had, and I think he can be put in that type of conversation of these new athletic tight ends. He checks all the boxes, except he needs back-to-back years of that type of production in order to start getting in that conversation, in my opinion. So I think, while he already had a breakout, I think he was the number 1 person that popped into my head. And unfortunately for the Bills, these first 2 don't lend itself well to the contract situation, extending contracts, because if they do have these breakout years, it really puts a lot of pressure on Bean and how he's going to be able to afford everybody, right? Because I also have Ed Oliver, even though I think, again, he's another guy that did break out. I'll get into it later. My expectations for Ed Oliver might be the biggest out of all this stuff that we're talking about in terms of projecting for the year. And Gabriel Davis is another one of those guys that, while he had the breakout game, I think you and I have been hesitant to crown him this number 2 wide receiver, not knowing how the production is going to keep up with increased targets, increased defensive, accounting for him in a different way. Will he be able to maintain that production? I don't know. If he can, then he's definitely going to have a breakout season. And again, put a lot of pressure on Brandon Bean with these top 3 guys. You're going to have to start making choices here. Then the rest of it would be, I think Kyer Elam's going to come in and have a really nice, I don't think he's going to have a breakout year, but I think he's going to surprise people with some consistent play for a rookie at the cornerback position. Tim Settle, I think, is also, because being buried on that depth chart and what I think the Bills want to do to utilize him, I think that he could have sort of like a Jordan Phillips type year in Buffalo, where he just has, maybe it's not a ton of reps, but he has productive plays when he's here. And then I think we're going to see a huge leap forward from Greg Rousseau this year, playing with Von Miller, playing with a much better defensive line across the board in the rotation. I think we see a big leap for him.
So you touched on a lot of the guys on my list. The couple that maybe you didn't have there, or that I noted a different direction. I think we might see a breakout for Spencer Brown. You know, he was really inexperienced.
Close to being on my list, yeah.
Came in, started well, and then the question is, did he struggle, or did he try to push through injury and coming back too quick from COVID, and that's why he struggled? And I think if you're going to bet on a guy making a leap and being able to improve, a piece that you want to bet on is a guy with elite historic levels of, you know, athletic potential, who went to a small school, who had to sit out an entire college season before coming into the league, and then got rushed into the starting lineup without playing any reps in the starting lineup in training camp or in the preseason games, and just had to jump in a couple games in. I think now having an entire offseason to get healthy, an entire training camp to get himself right, and that elite athleticism, I think we could see a huge breakout of Spencer Brown as the dominant athlete that he could be at right tackle. And then on the defensive side, you touched on a lot of the guys that I would have mentioned, but I'll throw a little thing in there. I think there's a chance we see maybe a breakout per se in the level of expectations way down here to what we actually get from Boogie Basham. And I think that we could get a lot more rotational contributions and some flash plays where I think a lot of people aren't expecting anything. And I think he could be a nice piece that shows he could really maybe even leapfrog AJ Epinesa and Shaq Lawson for that third rotational defensive end spot and have a couple nice flashes consistently and be that guy that people are clamoring for to get on the field. And maybe he's the guy who plays next to Ed Oliver in some of those third and longs, and that he can be, you know, a guy who actually gives a breather to Miller and Rousseau without losing a ton. So he's another name that I think we might be able to see.
Yeah, I don't hate that one. And I was right there with you with Spencer Brown. I didn't put him on the list, but I will circle back to Spencer Brown later. Nice. Our friend Lauren here asking me to settle count as young. I do think so, because I put Knox on there. Knox is 25. Settle's also only 25 years old.
Sneaky. Tim Settle was the youngest free agent in the entire NFL. He was the youngest player to have gone through his rookie contract at any position. So he was the youngest free agent in the NFL as far as guys who had completed their rookie contract. So he's very young by NFL standards.
And so for clarification, would that probably be our cutoff, like 25 years old?
Yes.
Considered young in the NFL, I'm guessing?
Yeah,
that's where
that's always, they always do those lists of like best players under 25 and stuff like that. That's normally the cutoff. So yeah, this is his last year to count as young.
I'm at the end of my NFL career.
Hey, until Brady retires, there are still NFL players older than me. Yeah. I had I
might be able to be a specialist.
Andrew, who is the Rams tackle, Whitworth. Andrew Whitworth is like 9 days older than me. So when he retired, I lost one more that was actually still older than me. All I have is Brady left, and that's it.
There you go.
So, anything, I know, you know, we talked about some statistical expectations, and, you know, we're not going to go position by position up, but maybe similar to our breakouts. Are there any that stand out to you that you think, you know, here are some things that I think we're going to see? You know, so I'll throw a couple of mine out. I think we see double-digit sacks for Von Miller. I don't think it's going to be 18, but I think we see 10 sacks. I think we see that 8 to 12 range, and then obviously we want the big performance in the playoffs, but I think we do see a nice season from that standpoint. I think we do see some things with a 1,000-yard, maybe 10 touchdown season for Gabe Davis. And I do think, you know, you touched on your very first one in the breakouts. I think Dawson Knox is not being talked about, in that people are just assuming it's Jamison Crowder versus Isaiah McKenzie for that wide receiver 3 who's replacing Cole Beasley. And I do think this 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets where OJ Howard can stay in to block, and now Dawson Knox gets to run more routes. He might be more of the slot option, more of that. Yeah, you've talked about him as he might even be the second passing option, and maybe he's competing with Gabriel Davis. I have some high expectations for Dawson Knox statistically of what he's going to show to be able to go that path.
Yeah, I do too. So I'll run through in order of my notes, sort of.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Siri, how dare you interrupt me like that? So my notes when we were talking about the statistical expectations, again, I agree with you that I'm not going to come out and say this is going to be exactly what they have, but I'll give ranges of sort of what I expect. So like the ones that I immediately thought of, Josh Allen, right? I think he continues on the path that he's had, maybe 4.5 thousand yards, right around there, plus 30 touchdowns. I think this one might not be an expectation, but more of a hope for me. I think minus 13 interceptions, 13 or less interceptions on the year.
That.
I'd like to see him stay under that 15 that he had last year. So that might be me projecting some hope out into the world. Stephon Diggs, I think it's probably safe to say that we can expect 100 receptions from Stephon Diggs, being the number one true alpha receiver targeted in the way he does. I expect him to go over 1,000 yards again. I expect 8+ TDs from Stephon Diggs as a true number one alpha receiver. The ones that I'm kind of on that I really wanted to think about was Gabe Davis. I think it's hard for this one has been on my mind really all off season. You lost Emmanuel Sanders, you lost Cole Beasley, you bring in Jamison Crowder. I'm not really sure totally how that plays into the offense. Yeah, I don't think that's a 1-for-1 of taking Beasley's receptions. I think he's going to be used in a little bit of a different manner than Beasley. So I'm interested to see the percentages of targets and the percentages of looks that do end up going Gabe Davis's way here. But my expectations for him is 70+ receptions, between that 800, 900 yard mark, I think right around there, and 5+ TDs. I think for me, that would solidify all the things that I've been hyped up to think about Gabe Davis being a true number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. I think if he could do that, he's in for a nice contract from Brandon Beane, and that he'll have a nice productive season. Knox, I have at 50+ receptions, 700+ yards, 8 touchdowns or more. And then my last one is more defense as a total. I didn't want to do individual. So again, top 5 in DVOA. I think that's my expectation for them to maintain that top 5.
I really want 50 sacks. I really would like 50 sacks.
Do you? I have them as top 5 pass DVOA because I think that's the most important thing. We'll probably get frustrated with the run defense again. And then I have them as a top 5, between top 5 and 8 sack production for the year in the NFL. So I'm not going to pick a number for sack production, but I think as long as they're kind of pushing to that top 5 in the NFL, I think that is what I expect of adding a Von Miller and adding the rotation that they've had, that the team itself is going to increase the sack production.
Yeah. And just as a reference, I think 6th would have been 48 last year. So 6 to 8 was
right
48 to 46.
And they were in the top 10. They were close, I think. Into
the Bills were tied for 10th. I think 11th, that range.
Yeah.
So and that's why you go and spend that money is you want to see one, Von Miller finish a few more times and his pressure pushing guys into other people finishing. Now, instead of Ed Oliver missing on his sack, he's finishing because Von Miller flushed the guy out.
Well, even
and Gregory
the
Rousseau
going to Miller opens up Ed Oliver, opens up somebody else to do work one-on-one. So I think we can expect an increase in that production.
Okay, so that's a good one here. And we have some kind of philosophical, emotional things we'll get to at the end here to close the show. But we thought a fun one would be to go through actual season awards and what we want to go through. And obviously you always do that kind of in reverse order. But one of those is MVP, and I don't know that that's even worth talking about. Is there anyone who we could possibly expect to be the MVP besides Josh Allen?
Devin Singleton. No. Yeah, so what brought this up is we were kind of talking about our expectations. And at the end of every year, we hand out these awards. But we've never gone ahead and guessed.
I don't think so. Yeah, I kind of like this one.
Right. So that's why we were kind of chatting about this and said, hey, well, let's go ahead and throw out, if we're speculating and doing some expectations, let's throw some out. And then it'll be fun to go back and see. But MVP has got to be, if the expectation, if we're talking about 1 seeds and making a run to the Super Bowl, you don't do that unless your quarterback's playing elite. Absolutely MVP level. And so if he's playing at MVP level in the NFL, he's the team MVP. So it's got to be Josh. It's going to be Josh. If it's not Josh, then it's going to be probably a terrible season. And we're not
something bad happened.
Something bad.
Something terrible happened.
Exactly.
So, all right. So we've got that one out of the way. We both have Josh Allen as MVP. Shocker. That's the shocker of the night. Let's go to Offensive Player of the Year then. So with the non-Josh Allen category here,
Allen,
yeah, because he probably would also be this one. Who is your non-Josh Allen Offensive Player of the Year?
For me, this one's also really easy. It's got to be Stephon Diggs. I think that the production that he's put up 2 years in a row, I'm expecting him to maintain that level of production. I don't think there's a defensive back in the NFL that can guard him at all. I think it takes a scheme to stop him. And so I think in step with Josh Allen being the dynamic player he is, Stephon Diggs is a dynamic weapon on top of that. So for me, he is that offensive player that's the next best to Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I think that obviously I agree. I think it is Stephon Diggs, and I tried to go a little bit out. I tried to look for like interesting takes. I have one on defense, but on offense, I think it's crazy to think anyone else is going to have the singular impact that he has. And there's no better example than all of the attention that's around Gabe Davis.
Yes.
If you go back and watch that Chiefs game, it's because they bracketed the crap out of Stephon Diggs, and he had so much defensive attention and gravity tilting the field that they just rolled the dice that Gabe Davis wouldn't kill them, and he did. So I'm curious if that balances a little bit this year, if they're able to use some of those different things. Can they move some pieces around? But I think we see that 160 targets again, just like we had the last 2 years, and that, NFL leading kind of target share, catches, yards, touchdowns, the whole deal. And I do think that he's the most logical offensive player.
To me, that whole idea of he's such a dynamic player that obviously defense's number one thing is account for Josh Allen, right? Like in the pocket, outside the pocket, he's a creature. You got to account for him. But outside of that, when you're a defensive coordinator, like he reminds me of, I throw back to the NBA all the time, teams with LeBron, when they go up against LeBron or Steph Curry. It's either you just let that guy score his 40 and get his and try to stop everything else from beating you, or you focus all your attention on him and let the Delonte Wests of the world try to beat you, right? Like those are the two options. And Stephon Diggs, to me, if I'm a defensive coordinator, it's either I have to put so much bracketed coverage and attention on this one guy that we're going to leave people out on islands and leave people to do their jobs against pretty good players, or I'm going to go one-on-one with Diggs and just, if he beats us, he beats us, but I'm going to stop everything else. I think that type of stress that a true number wide receiver puts on defensive coordinators makes him that offensive player of the year outside of Josh, for sure.
So for the defensive player of the year,
who you got?
So obviously, you kick around the options that you have there. Is it going to just directly be Von Miller? Is Trey White going to come back, fast enough? Is it going to be, both of us kind of leaned Jordan Poyer last year.
Yeah.
Does Miller create enough attention to allow Ed Oliver? And I think all those different pieces, and you heard the comments from Leslie Frazier. I think I'm going to pick Tremaine Edmonds.
Are you?
So I think that all those other pieces, and in the chat we heard Daquan Jones, other guys that are going to allow him to actually be the rangy athletic freak that he is, and to just play the way he's supposed to, and that it's a contract year for him too. And I know fans are worried about what that number is. Well, he's probably a little worried about that too. And he wants to show everybody he's worth that huge contract, whatever it is.
And he sees the noise about him.
Yeah, 12, 14, 16, whatever, however many million a year it is, it's going to be a lot. And he wants the big number and wants to earn it. And I do think, I was wrong. 2 years ago, I thought he was going to have this huge breakout second year, and then I kind of dialed it back, like, all right, let's wait and see what's going to go on here. Now we've seen him kind of level a little bit, but with issues of not good defensive tackle play in front of him, not having the structure the way it is, and asking him to do things out of his skill set. I think it's set up really nicely here that we could see that freak athleticism, fifth year, having all the knowledge that he's built up while he's still at that high-end uber elite athleticism. I really think we might see it all come together.
I love this, and I hope that is true. I'm a little mad because you didn't put him in your young guy breakout expectations. And if you're going to make him the defensive player of the year, he should be in that list, Greg, because he's still a young guy, right? He qualifies for this. So I like it. I'm not willing to put my name on it, but I do like it. I do think he is definitely a candidate to have that type of breakout season. He's better than fans want to admit already. So a breakout for him really isn't a huge step.
And it would be because what Leslie Frazier asked for, he does that and comes through with more flash plays, which is also, this is not derogatory to fans, but like people who don't break down coverage film to see what he took away in the middle of the field, they're judging it on those flash plays. And if he has that, everyone's going to come together. The guys who vote for him for Pro Bowl from the other teams, the executives from other teams who voted him the 6th best linebacker in the NFL, and the fans who want to see the flash plays and just the big highlights, that's what's going to come together and would make him that defensive player of the year kind of candidate.
Yeah, I hope so. I like it. Mine is Ed Oliver. Yeah, like I said earlier, my expectations for Ed Oliver are through the roof. I can't remember the last time that I was this high on the potential for a player's breakout for him. We saw it last year. Really, I think he had an all-pro second half of the season. He's not going to ever be an Aaron Donald. I don't think he's that type of game wrecker, but the type of chaos that he can create, and now that you add a Von Miller and you add a Daquan Jones playing next to him, taking up that space, I like this whole rotation that they've got better. I think even the defensive tackle rotation where he's taking off snaps is better. I think it's going to wear down defenses in a different way, or wear down offensive lines in a different way. And I think he's going to explode with production this year. He's already creating havoc on plays like similar to Tremaine Edmonds, that they're not quantitative plays, that they don't end up charting as a tackle for loss or all these crazy things, but he is disruptive on almost every snap. And now he's going to be able to play in position with a true edge rusher that, again, similar to Stephon Diggs, offensive coordinators are now going to have a conversation. We were talking the Bussin' with the Boys. Eric Wood was on Bussin' with the Boys, and he was talking about the Bills pass rush and that rotation. And while it was good, nobody really had to I like Jerry and he was productive, but offensive coordinators and offensive line coaches didn't have to shift focus to a Jerry Hughes or a Mario Addison. They didn't have to do a whole lot of that. What does a breakout season look for Oliver? 10 plus sacks, maybe. I think hovering around that type of sack production is
not a lot of defensive tackles go double digits.
Yeah, no, I think if he can just be, similar to Tremaine Edmonds, creating those splash plays, being the guy that gets his hands on balls, forces some fumbles on quarterbacks in the pocket, just creating havoc in the backfield. To me, it's not any one statistical marker that is going to push him. It's just continuing what he did in the second half of last season, which was just total chaos in the backfield. I want more of that from Ed Oliver, and I can't wait to see him play with a real good defensive line surrounding him.
So now I was going to split it, but if we do offensive rookie of the year and defensive rookie of the year, it's a cop-out because it's an easy answer for either one. So we'll stick to who is the Buffalo Bills rookie of the year.
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't, because you were going to split it.
Yeah.
And it does feel a little copy-outy because I know that there's a lot of excitement for Khalil Shakir to come in and be somebody that produces. I think that's a hard room to get in right now in terms of production. I think James Cook will get touches, and so he will probably be, if you were splitting them up. But to me, honestly, it's got to be Kaiir Elam. You picked him to be a guy that comes in and produces right away. And this defense, if they're going to be one of the top pass DVOA defenses in the NFL, if they're going to be a defense that continues to be what they've been over the last 3 or 4 years, they need him to step up, especially if Trey White, like we were talking a couple of weeks ago, if he's going to be out a month for 4 games, Elam's need to step in right away. I guess the only other one would be Punt God, maybe would be your rookie of the year, just in that if he's better than Matt Hawk and comes in and we don't talk about punters all the time, or he is what he's projected to be and comes in and is one of the best punters in the NFL, there'd be a scenario for him to be that. But I think Elam will play enough reps and have enough of a role in this team where he's going to have the ability to earn being the rookie of the year more than anybody else.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple different paths here, because I do think that, Jason brought up Cook, Charles brought up Cook, and I do think James Cook is going to have some really exciting flash plays. He's going to take a screen to the house. He's going to look nice out of the backfield. He's going to break a draw for a big play. I don't know if he's going to get quite enough touches to total it. I think I was talking with Ryan Sullivan earlier today because somebody asked him about the amount of touches, and it doesn't take that much to get to 120, 150. That's 5 carries a game and 4 catches a game at the high end, and like 4 carries and 2.5 catches a game, that's 120. I think it was 4.4 carries per game, 2.6 catches per game. That's 120 touches with, I think it was like 75 carries and 45 catches, something like that. So it's not hard to get to a reasonable number, but the reason I think it's Kaiir Elam is when you have as strong of a secondary as what the Bills do, and that you have all the other pieces there, teams are both going to test Kaiir Elam and have no choice but have the alternative be over there towards Kaiir Elam. And I think his athleticism, his range, he's going to have some of those Trayvon Diggs kind of moments that he's probably going to give up a big play more than what we'd like, but he's also going to have some interceptions and some pass breakups because quarterbacks are going to try to test him as a rookie and as the relatively weakest link among those 5 guys in the secondary because the other 4 are so good. I think he's going to have some nice flash plays that are really going to come across well, and that I think he could be in NFL defensive player of the or defensive rookie of the year running because how easily skewed some of those things are by flash plays, by highlights, by interceptions as a thing, and that if some other rookie doesn't have, it's not that often that you get, the rookie season we saw last year in Dallas and having, Micah Parsons having tons of sacks and all those kind of things. That doesn't happen all the time. You might not have that guy this year who has a huge statistical breakout kind of season. So you could have, if he has 4 or 5 interceptions, that could put him in the running for it. So I'm curious to see where that comes from, but I agree because of that and because he's going to play from day one and is going to get tested, I think it is going to be Kaiir Elam.
For sure. It makes the most sense.
Yeah. So one last one here. Who is your most improved player on the Buffalo Bills?
This sort of circles back, and this is tough for me because I'm also a little bit of a hypocrite because I didn't put him in my young guy breakout. He was somebody that I was kind of teetering with on that. But I think for most improved, I was thinking who has the biggest step to take, like to get to their ceiling, and who can maybe take that step to get there. And for me, it's Spencer Brown. I think Spencer Brown has the biggest opportunity to be the most improved. When you look at a lot of this roster and the guys that are going to play significant snaps, there really isn't like huge jumps in improvement that a lot of these guys can take. Like Stephon Diggs is who he is, right? Jamison Crowder's not going to come in and all of a sudden do a ton more, in my opinion, that he's already done in his career. Gabe Davis has already proven that he can have some production. It's just taking that production and multiplying it out throughout the season. So to me, the biggest opportunity to take a big step forward was Spencer Brown. And really, let's be honest, the Bills need that. He didn't perform all that well. I think that we're high on him because he has the physical traits and he does things that Bills fans love, crushes beers cans and takes sips of them and talks shit to people and tells people they're little. Like all that stuff plays well with fans. And John Feliciano did this a little bit for a couple of years here where he probably got more fandom than his talent justified him having because of all the little things he did. And I think that right now Spencer Brown's sort of in that area, but it's also, he has freak athleticism. It's off the charts. So you see the opportunity for him to really hit that ceiling. And he did have some good plays, really great, some road grade blocking in the run game. The pass protection was iffy. If he can kind of figure that out a little bit this offseason, to me, he has the biggest jump possible to become the most improved player. And again, he's going to get the snaps to prove it.
So I think you hit on a lot of the things I would have touched on. And I think that some of the guys you brought up earlier, I don't know, like most improved is relative. I do think we see another step forward from Dawson Knox. Mm-hmm. I think we see another step forward from Gabe Davis. I brought up Tremaine Edmonds, and if he takes that kind of leap, you could probably argue he could be most improved. If you see a full season of that way that Ed Oliver ended last year, you could make an argument for him. But I brought up the two guys in my breakout that I think kind of touch on where I see though that improvement is Spencer Brown that you brought up, and I do think Boogie Basham is a guy that, you know, the relative leap I think he could make is why he would be in that consideration from a guy who was literally game day inactive, a complete afterthought, no one expecting much of anything, to now being a guy we want on the field and that we see, you know, pushing for more snaps and wanting to get him more reps. I think that's the kind of thing that we could see. So
the other one would be if the Bills could ever just unlock Isaiah McKenzie, like fans keep telling me, and just feed this guy, he could be the most improved player. We're just holding him back.
Yeah, I mean, if he just has 17 of those Patriots games, you're talking about like a Devontae Adams kind of season. It's just I mean, Ken Dorsey just has to choose to do
unlock
that.
Him. Gotta unlock him.
And it's there. So the last couple things here are, we'll start with the fan side of it and then go with our own, is kind of how to manage this new world and how to be able to manage these new levels of expectations. We talked about it earlier, and where it's on analysts on ESPN, analysts on Good Morning Football, all the analysts from around the NFL, all these top 10 lists that are coming out, whether it's the top GMs, top coaches, top positional players. The Bills are in all of them. Or if they're not, it's a huge uproar if they're not listed in all of them. And it's not Bills fans. It's other people asking what the heck's wrong with you? Why aren't the Bills players on that list? And it's a new world for us. We're not used to being the Super Bowl front runner and the Super Bowl favorite. We're not used to having these expectations of, hey, debating is not getting the number one seed a failure. If you looked at, I think that the Athletic did their fan poll, some of those numbers were crazy in like the number of fans that said it would be a failure if they don't win the Super Bowl. And I get it. Like, don't get me wrong, like Super Bowl or bust, if you're the favorite, like, and you don't do it, something was wrong, but like, you can still have a really fun, good season and then have something happen at the end and lose a shootout. And I don't think that equates to failure, but how many people feel that way and disagree with what I just said is new for all of us. So what message do you have for fans of how to still enjoy this season without maybe setting the bar quite so high that it has to be anything short of holding that trophy is just a miserable failure, and how to manage these new expectations in a world where there's actual, bandwagon Bills fans? We haven't had that in a long time.
Yeah, right. Well, first of all, I still am a fan. I will never admit to anything else. So managing the expectations and how to do it, I don't know that I could give any advice because I'm still trying to figure that out myself, how to manage these expectations. But no, I mean, I spent like 20, 30 minutes earlier. Josh Allen was trending on my trending topics, and I scrolled through and it was just people talking about how he's just unbelievable and nobody can stop him in offense. And like,
it was now a hot take. Our one guy, Marcus Whitman, him making the case, they're like, hey, settle down. Josh Allen's not the number one quarterback. And people lost their minds.
I will say I lost my mind a little bit with how he worded that tweet to get it, because he said, like, he's just not the best quarterback. But then, like, he dialed it back down in the thread where he's like, well, like, he's top 5, but he's not number 1. And it's like, okay, well, like, one, I would like to throw out rankings. Yeah, let's just do tiers and then pick your personal preference from there. But as long as he's in that top tier, I don't need your hot takes. But for the fan expectations, I think the Super Bowl or bust mentality, I understand. I get that there's no moral victories, all that tough guy stuff. I understand it.
And don't get me wrong, I still want one before I die too. Yes. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I desperately want that. Yeah. But I mean, I'm also going to enjoy 20 weeks of football either way.
I'm going to enjoy, especially if it's good football and the wheels haven't fallen off.
And it will. Well, heck, hold on.
Yes. Come on.
It's going to be a whole lot of good weeks of football.
Yes. Yeah. This is a good football team. I think we'll see a lot of good football, but don't think for a second when people talk about the parity in the NFL, and even though they're saying, oh, the AFC is top heavy, like, and we look at some of these teams, and it's fun to make fun of the Miami Dolphins. It's fun to make fun of the New England Patriots. But those games are still going to be, even though the Patriots games weren't hard the last 2, there are going to be some tough divisional games in here. There's going to be some tough games. The margins in the NFL are incredibly thin. When you start ranking players and seeing, looking at the statistics of players and what it would take for one player to jump over another in these stats. And like you said, the amount of touches that it takes to get a guy from 70 touches to 100 touches, like, all the margins in the NFL are super slim. You have a system that is a one and done playoff system, which isn't like in any other sport. You don't get a 7-game series in the NFL. Any anything can happen. So the idea of Super Bowl or bust to me is just, it's really crazy because it just leaves out no room for any of the context and variables that life isn't pretty. Life doesn't work on computer algorithms. Like, you can put this NFL season through a computer simulation, and more times than not, the Bills are going to win a Super Bowl, but we don't live in that reality. Anything can happen. So I will never be on Super Bowl or bust. And if you're a fan that has those expectations, even with as big of a margin universally that the Bills are picked to win this Super Bowl, more times than not, you're going to be wrong and disappointed if you live by Super Bowl or bust. It's hard to win a Super Bowl. 1 out of 32 teams is going to do it. Even though you have the best odds to do it, it's still a shot in the dark that you're going to win that thing. And so
I think statistically, I saw the favorite still means like a 12.5% chance instead of like a 4% chance.
Correct. This is not easy to do. And I hate to say it because the Patriots made it look pretty easy of getting the Super Bowls all the time, but it is not. It really isn't. And I
hope we're wrong. I hope we go on a 20-year run where we're in every other Super Bowl, and that would be great.
Multiple Super Bowls would be everything I ever want. I think the Bills are closer than they've ever been, in my opinion. Maybe from that 90 team, the 1990 team, but I think they're as close as they've ever been. Definitely in the salary cap era. They've never had a roster that was as primed to do it, with a coaching staff that was as experienced and primed to do it. So I understand, again, back to, I'm bordering on the people that have the over the top best case scenario expectations. Reality is really bordering on that, right? Like, where this team is, where the expectation should be, are really bordering on that best case scenario. But I don't think you can go, it's Super Bowl or bust, or it's if Josh Allen doesn't win in the MVP, it's not a perfect season, or whatever it is. Just enjoy fun football and know that as long as nothing terribly crazy happens, your favorite football team's probably going to win their division. They are going to be at the end going into the playoffs as one of the favorites still to win the Super Bowl going into that. And I think as long as it's there, we should just kick back, relax, and enjoy whatever the outcome is.
Yeah. And that's, I think, leads right into how we're managing our own expectations. And I'll speak for myself in that I plan to enjoy every single week, every single moment. I really want to be present in this season. And that's, I think, that's healthy advice for all of you in your life. Be present with your kids. Be present with your spouse. Be present with the people that you're with.
I feel like you've been listening to me all these years now.
Well, yeah, you're rubbing off. The only way to enjoy a season like this is not to look ahead and not to set expectations where they have some amazing 51-3 win. You're okay, good. They were supposed to do that. Let's move on to the next one. But no, soak it all in. Enjoy it. Watch the games more than once. Watch them more than twice. Watch all of our shows and then go back and watch them again. Enjoy every single minute of this. Read all the other content. Listen to national shows. Listen to other. We have a ton of awesome shows on Cover One. A great lineup coming. Soak in and take in as much of this season as possible, because we don't know how this is going to last. Do I think Brandon Beane's going to continue to build really deep, competitive, solid rosters? Yes, I do. But crazy stuff happens. Weird things happen. I know this season's going to be fun. I know that it's going to be enjoyable. I hope it ends the way that I want it to end. But I know there's going to be really fun, great stuff to watch along the way. Soak all of it in. And that's how I plan to manage my expectations, is not to get ahead of myself, not to only look down the line, not to be thinking 2 and 3 weeks down. And that's the same kind of stuff that Sean McDermott is going to be sharing with his team. In the same way, I go back, if you guys remember, in that 2007 season with the Patriots, it was a constant running joke that they were actually wearing T-shirts about humble pie. And about how Belichick kept telling them, I don't care if you're undefeated. Here's what you can get better at. Here's what you need to focus on. Here's why you need to take this next opponent seriously. And kept them in the moment and kept them present. And I know that's the kind of thing that Sean McDermott is going to be driving home in that locker room, in that don't read the press clippings. You haven't accomplished anything. You haven't done anything yet. You haven't, there's nothing to celebrate. There's no banner to raise. There's no ring on your finger. There's no trophy to hold. You have to earn that every single day as we do this. And I'm going to try to take that same approach to enjoy all the stories that come out, all the podcasts, all the shows, everything that's out there, and to be able to go through and to really manage my own expectations by staying in the moment.
Thank you, Lauren.
Lauren's awesome.
Yeah, appreciate you. Sort of on the flip side of everything you said, I agree with you, and you said it great. I would say, for managing my own expectations and back to fan expectations, I would encourage people not to let any slumps throughout this season. So back to that first start of the season, say they go 4-3. Fans you can't lose your mind. This team is good enough that if they have a couple games where they drop a game where they shouldn't. Last year, I felt like the team was super good, right? You had a really good team on paper. You knew what this team could do. And then every time they had a bit of a slump, people were like, there's no way this team's even making the playoffs. I'm out on this team. This is stupid. They always do this. Like, people get so mad because they're not in the moment meeting their expectations. It's a very long season, even though it's not the longest season in sports. You don't have 100 games. A lot can happen between September, October, November. As long as they're playing their best football at that end of that season, we say it every year, and getting good. Don't let any slumps in the beginning of the season ruin what you just talked about, and the fact that ultimately it's going to be a good season, because those people last year that were sulking after the Jags game, even though that was terrible and we had to come on and do a post-game show and we weren't happy about it, but they continued to sulk and like, this team's no good, they're not going to do anything. I feel like enjoyed their season less because they got caught up in the individual moments of the season and didn't realize, like, hey, there's plenty of time to fix these issues. We still have a good team. They're going to be all right. They're going to get it back on track. Just remember seasons of the past and focus on that. Hey, they've been through some of these situations before. We have a number of veteran leaders. We have guys that have played in big games. They all know and trust the process and trust that as long as they stay together, that they're going to fix whatever slump they go through. So that would be my other sort of, to your point of, embrace all the good moments. Also, don't overreact to the bad, and know that those things happen to all these NFL teams, even the best ones in the league, that they're going to have some bad moments, and that we believe in this team enough to get through those.
Absolutely. It's really well said. And, a couple good questions that we've had here that I'm going to not answer, but I'm going to direct you to a place to get your answer. Cloudwalker with a good one saying, do you guys think our running attack will be a factor with the additions of Cromer and Cook? I'm not going to answer that because I want you to go watch last night's film room where Eric and Anthony and Kendall had Rick Bates on the show, who was giddy about all the things that Aaron Cromer is going to do and what they're going to allow this team to do. They talked about gap schemes versus zone schemes, all the different things we're going to do. Is an awesome show. Heck, the week before we had Mitch Morris on, and guess what? Tomorrow night we're going to have Shaq Lawson on the show. NFL players and the Buffalo Bills players know where to go to get the best intelligent dialogue and discussion, and every single time it happens, you can see it in their reactions with how informed the guys are, how stellar they're able to be able
show.
To
they
speak
won't get
about.
That.
No,
they will not
correct.
get that from this show, but
yeah. Way more intelligent than us. But the kind of dialogue and insight that they get on the film room and being able to come on, it's going to be fantastic. So, again, go back and watch the Mitch Morris show last week. Go back and watch last night's show with Ryan Bates. And tomorrow night, be ready. Shaq Lawson's coming on with another great interview as well. So, certainly a great opportunity. And if you want to be able to get the insight on those and the early preview of those, make sure you're getting ready to sign up for the Cover One premium subscription. We've got a lot of really exciting stuff coming here. Keep your eyes out. Some really exciting additional value and benefit that we're going to be bringing to you guys to make it even better, to be able to read all of our content, see everything that's there, get in the premium Slack channel, being able to talk with us all the time. So many good things coming for this season.
Yeah, totally. You nailed it. I'm really excited about this team that we've put together. I'm excited to get down to camp and interact with fans. This is something we haven't been able to really do for a couple of years now. I loved the last time we were down there. We got to do that spot with Nate Geary. I'm holding Nate to having us back on WGR when we see him at camp in a couple of weeks here. But I'm just excited. I keep getting these brief little moments of, I'm outside on the deck in the morning reading and it's a little bit crisp and it feels like football, or it's like real hot in the afternoon and I get a whiff of the cut grass and it just feels like training camp and getting ready for training camp again. So I can feel the winds of football starting to arise in Western New York. And the excitement's building. You're seeing more and more of my neighbor. I was just talking to my neighbor's son. the other day. He got his season tickets. He's heading to camp for the first. He hasn't been to camp as a season ticket holder. He's heading down. Like everyone's already starting to get a little bit more and more excited. I might even throw my Bills flag back out on my house here in a little bit because the time is coming. We're ramping up. And like Greg said, make sure you're following everybody at the network. I love this team. There's a few people that we've been able to add over the last month or so, even last year, that I've been big fans of for a while. And to add them to this team has just been really cool. And what an honor. And I couldn't be more proud to work with such a good team of just guys that put out so much work. And if you knew the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes to get that out, you'd be astonished. So hats off to all the guys. I'm probably the least hardworking guy at the Cover One Network.
But that's saying something. That's
I always have been, but now it's by a lot. Like now I'm slacking.
No, it's really by an embarrassing amount how much harder these guys are working. I can justify it to myself before. Now I almost feel bad about it.
Yeah, now I'm way back.
So I honestly, guys, check it out. There's good shows on every single night. The website is just crushing it with all the written content that's out there. We're going to be able to add so many different things of what you have going. And again, Hans Hansel, Uber is fantastic. Greg Vorse, Ryan Sullivan, Chris Seth is doing a fantastic job. All the guys that are coming aboard, so many good additions to the staff. And again, it's because of how much we're trying to build up to just bring you more value for those premium subscriptions and everything that we have. So thank you guys very, very much. The chat was fantastic tonight. You guys were awesome as usual. Next week, Aaron, tell the people about the fun guest we have coming on.
Yeah, so for those of you that really time off our episodes and block off time on Wednesday nights, we won't be live on Wednesday next week. We are going to be switching over to Thursday because we have Aaron Schatz from Football Outsiders coming on. And this is one I'm really excited for because I won't lie, probably 5 or 6 years ago, Greg, I was not an Aaron Schatz fan, and he would be on WGR with Shope and the Bulldog, and he would be talking up DVOA, and he'd be talking up the Patriots because their DVOA was incredible 7 years ago. And I was like, wow, whatever. This is another BS made up stat. I don't want to hear about it because it doesn't say the Bills are good. But the more that I've gotten into this line of work and doing content and kind of immersing myself in these types of statistics and having these conversations with smart football people, I've come more and more to Football Outsiders and DVOA being one of my favorite stats to use because of the context that's baked in, and they account for so many of the variables. And so for me, I want to have Aaron Schatz on. I'm really excited for this one too. I don't know that everyone understands DVOA or has been able to kind of get a full grasp of what DVOA stands for. And I don't know that I always, Twitter doesn't give you the characters to explain it properly. And so I'm excited to have him on because for me, DVOA is the one that answers all the yeah buts. Right. People come when I say, hey, the Bills defense was one of the top defenses in the NFL. Yeah, but they played no quarterbacks. Well, DVOA accounts for that. So I'm excited to talk to Aaron Schatz, how he came up with that and what that means and why people should look out for that. But also he's got his season preview, the Football Outsiders season preview coming up. And I think he has some good things to say about the Bills. I haven't seen it yet, but he alluded to that to be a good time to have him on a Bills related show. So I'm excited to see what his thoughts are going to be and get his expectations of the Bills going into the season. So make sure you're coming on for that and show, get here live and show Aaron Schatz that it's worth coming onto the Cover One Buffalo podcast live and show him how our fan base turns out.
Absolutely. And I love, the work you put in to bring somebody like that on the show is great because it's going to be objective because he's been openly critical of the Bills in the past. So that it's not some slanted homerish view. It's going to be somebody who's going to lay it straight. And I can't wait to hear what he has to share. So make sure you're checking that out. Then right after that, we are going to be live on site in training camp, and the night before on the 23rd, if you want to come hang out, have a drink with us, we're going to be at the Uncle Jumbo's tasting room on Elmwood on the 23rd, the night before camp opens. Then we'll be driving out. We're actually hanging out, going to be in camp each of the first couple days on the 24th and 25th. I can't wait to hang out, barbecue, watch some football, watch camp open up. Some really exciting things. So looking forward to seeing some of the fans, hanging out together, spending time with you, my man Aaron, and all the other guys. So looking forward to it. But tonight, again, you guys have been awesome. On behalf of Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.